A man forgotten by the world. Jake wandered through the busy city streets, his clothes worn and ragged, his shoes barely holding together. To the passers-by, he was invisible, a ghostly figure who had become part of the urban landscape. He moved with the weariness of a man who had lost his way, not just in the physical sense, but also in life. He had once been like those people who walked past him, hurrying to their destinations, absorbed in their own concerns. But that was a distant memory now. The life he once knew, with its comforts and securities, had vanished into the ether, leaving him to navigate a world that seemed to have forgotten him. Years ago, Jake had been a part of the city's rhythm. He had a job, a small apartment, and friends he could call family. But fate had dealt him a harsh hand. His company had downsized, his apartment was repossessed, and his relationships deteriorated. Jake had lost everything: his home, his job, and the people he cared about. It wasn't his fault. The world had simply changed, and he had been left behind. Now, every day was a battle for survival. Despite the hardships, Jake's heart remained kind. He didn't bother anyone and kept to himself, existing on the fringes of society. He often found solace in the park, where he could sit quietly on a bench and watch the world go by. Families laughed together, children played with abandon, and Jake, from his vantage point, could almost feel a sliver of the joy they experienced. Sometimes he longed to be a part of that world again, to experience the warmth of a home, the feeling of being loved, and the simple joys that had once been his. But each day, as the sun set and the cold began to seep into his bones, he was reminded of his reality. The city was cold, and its people were colder. One afternoon, as Jake rummaged through a trash can near the park, he heard a commotion. His attention was drawn to a group of older boys circling a younger child. The boy, no older than 10, stood alone, his eyes wide with fear. Jake didn't yet know the boy's name was Ethan, but he could see the vulnerability etched on his face. The bullies were laughing, shoving Ethan around and calling him names. The boy tried to move away, but they wouldn't let him. Jake's heart clenched. He recognized the fear in Ethan's eyes. It was a reflection of the helplessness he had felt countless times in his own life. Though his struggles were different now, the essence of fear and desperation was something he knew all too well. As he watched the bullies taunt and torment the boy, Jake felt a wave of empathy and anger. He wanted to intervene to protect Ethan from the cruelty that was being inflicted upon him. But fear gripped him. What if the bullies turned on him? What if they hurt him too? Jake had survived on the streets by avoiding trouble. He had learned to be cautious, to steer clear of conflict whenever possible. He wasn't as strong as he used to be, and the thought of facing a group of rowdy kids was daunting. But as he watched Ethan's desperate attempts to escape, something inside Jake snapped. He couldn't just stand by and watch. His palms grew sweaty, and his chest tightened with a mix of fear and resolve. Jake knew he had to act. He had always believed in standing up for what was right, but this was different. He was tired, weak, and uncertain of his own abilities. Still, he couldn't let these bullies continue to torment the boy. With each step Jake took toward the group, his heart pounded louder in his chest. The bullies were so engrossed in their cruelty that they hadn't noticed him yet. But Jake felt the tension in the air, and he knew that his presence would soon be acknowledged. He wasn't sure what he was going to say or do. All he knew was that he had to intervene. He couldn't allow these boys to hurt Ethan any more than they already had. As Jake drew closer, one of the bullies finally looked up. The boy's smirk faded as he saw the tall, tired man approaching. Jake wasn't a threatening figure by any means. His appearance was a stark contrast to the well-dressed, confident youths who surrounded Ethan. But there was something in Jake's eyes, a flicker of determination and defiance, that made the bully pause. The other boys turned their attention to Jake as well. They were clearly surprised to see someone like him, a homeless man with tattered clothes and a weary expression, daring to challenge them. For a moment, there was silence. The bullies exchanged glances, their expressions a mix of confusion and amusement. Jake's heart raced, his mind spinning with doubt. What if they laughed at him? What if they attacked him? He had no plan, no idea what to say. But he had come too far to back down now. He looked at Ethan, who was still sitting on the ground, clutching his backpack tightly. The boy's eyes were full of tears, and his small frame trembled with fear. Jake felt a surge of protectiveness rise within him. "Hey," Jake called out, his voice firm but trembling slightly. The bully stared at him, clearly taken aback by his sudden appearance. "Leave him alone." Jake could feel his pulse pounding in his ears. His muscles were tense, bracing for whatever might come next. The boys looked at him with a mixture of surprise and disdain. One of the bullies, the tallest of the group, stepped forward. His eyes were cold, and he sneered as he took in Jake's worn-out jacket and the holes in his shoes. "What do you think you're doing, old man?" the bully spat. His voice was dripping with mockery. "Look at you. You're a nobody. Why don't you just go back to your trash can?" The other boys laughed, their cruel laughter echoing in the park. One of them made a show, holding his nose as if Jake's very presence was offensive. "Yeah, we can smell you from here," he said, snickering. Despite the harsh words, Jake stood his ground. He had heard worse in his life, much worse. He wasn't going to let these boys intimidate him, not when Ethan was still sitting behind him, scared and helpless. Jake's resolve hardened. He had to protect this boy, even if it meant facing his own fears. The bullies continued to jeer and taunt, but Jake didn't waver. He kept his eyes locked on the boy in front of him, refusing to back down. His heart pounded in his chest, but he stood tall, determined to make a stand for what was right. A stand against cruelty. The bullies' laughter continued to ring in the air, harsh and mocking. The tallest of the group, a boy with a cruel twist to his lips, squared up to Jake. His gaze was cold and calculating, sizing Jake up as if evaluating whether he was worth the trouble. Jake felt a surge of anxiety, but he forced himself to remain resolute. He couldn't let his fears show. Not now. Not when Ethan's well-being was at stake. The bully's eyes narrowed and he took a step closer, his expression a mixture of curiosity and contempt. "What's your problem, old man? You think you're some kind of hero?" Jake's throat was dry, but he managed to steady his voice. "I'm not a hero. I'm just someone who can't stand to see a kid being picked on." The boy laughed, a harsh, bitter sound that seemed to pierce through the crisp afternoon air. "Oh, that's rich. What makes you think you can do anything about it? You're just a washed-up has-been. Why don't you get lost before you make things worse?" The other bullies exchanged glances, their amusement fading slightly as they observed the scene. They were clearly surprised by Jake's defiance. One of the boys, slightly smaller but with an air of confidence, stepped forward and pushed Jake's shoulder roughly. "Yeah, why don't you scram, man? We don't want any trouble." Jake stumbled slightly but caught himself. He held his ground, looking back at Ethan, who was still sitting on the ground, his eyes wide and tear-streaked. The sight of the boy's fear made Jake's heart ache. He couldn't let this continue. He couldn't let Ethan be the victim of this senseless cruelty. "I said leave him alone," Jake repeated, his voice firmer now, though it trembled slightly. He could feel his own fear mingling with a growing sense of determination. "You've had your fun. It's time to go." The tallest bully, who had been leading the group, snorted in disdain. "And what if we don't? What are you going to do about it?" Jake's mind raced, searching for a solution. He had no physical power to match these boys, and he knew it. But he had something more potent, his voice, his conviction, and a sense of justice that couldn't be easily silenced. He took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm of anxiety inside him. "I don't want any trouble," Jake said, "but I won't let you hurt this kid. He's done nothing wrong. He doesn't deserve this." The bullies exchanged uncertain glances. The smallest of the group, who had been silent until now, looked uneasy. "Maybe we should just go," he suggested, his voice lacking the previous bravado. The tallest bully's face reddened with anger. "You're such a loser," he spat at Jake, "but if you really want to make a scene, fine. But remember, this isn't over." He shoved Jake one last time, and with a final glare, the bullies began to disperse. The smallest one lingered for a moment, his eyes flicking nervously between Jake and Ethan, before hurrying after the others. The park, once filled with the harsh sounds of taunting, fell silent again, leaving behind a fragile peace. Jake watched the bullies leave, his heart still pounding from the confrontation. He turned to Ethan, who was slowly standing up, brushing the dirt from his clothes. The boy looked at Jake with a mixture of gratitude and uncertainty. Tears were still glistening in his eyes, but there was a hint of relief in his expression. "Are you okay?" Jake asked gently, his voice softening. He crouched down to Ethan's level, trying to offer comfort and reassurance. Ethan nodded slowly, his voice barely a whisper. "Thank you. I didn't know what to do." Jake smiled faintly. "You don't have to thank me. No one should have to go through that alone." Ethan glanced around as if suddenly realizing the park was no longer filled with hostile laughter. I live just around the corner," he said hesitantly. "I can walk home by myself." Jake nodded. "I'll walk with you. It's not safe to be alone right now." The two of them began to walk together, leaving the park behind. The journey was quiet at first, with Ethan casting occasional glances at Jake as if trying to make sense of what had just happened. Jake, for his part, felt a mix of exhaustion and relief. The adrenaline from the confrontation was starting to wear off, leaving him feeling drained but satisfied. As they walked, Jake found himself reflecting on the day's events. It was strange how life could throw people together in such unexpected ways. He had been a spectator, an observer of the world's indifference, but today he had stepped into the fray, risking himself to protect a child he didn't know. It was a small act of courage, but one that had made a significant impact. Ethan eventually spoke, breaking the silence. "My name is Ethan," he said, looking up at Jake with a shy smile. "What's yours?" "Jake," he replied, returning the smile. "Nice to meet you, Ethan." They continued walking, and Jake noticed Ethan's shoulders relaxing as they approached a modest apartment building. The neighborhood was quiet, the kind of place where people lived simple lives away from the hustle and bustle of the city center. Ethan stopped in front of one of the doors, his expression turning thoughtful. "Thank you again, Jake," Ethan said, his voice full of sincerity. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't come." Jake shook his head. "You don't have to thank me. Just promise me you'll be careful out there. Okay." Ethan nodded earnestly. "I will." As the boy opened the door, Jake took a step back, ready to leave. But before he could turn away, the door swung open and a figure appeared in the doorway. Jake's eyes widened in shock as he saw who stood before him. The man in the doorway was tall and impeccably dressed, a sharp contrast to Jake's ragged appearance. His face was familiar, one Jake had seen on billboards and in the media. He was none other than Robert Caldwell, a prominent philanthropist known for his charitable work and public appearances. The sight of Caldwell left Jake momentarily frozen. "Ethan, who is this?" Caldwell's voice was calm but carried an undertone of concern. He looked at Jake with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. Ethan looked up at his father, then back at Jake. "This is Jake. He helped me today. Some bullies were bothering me and he—" Caldwell's eyes widened in recognition as he took in Jake's worn appearance. For a moment, there was a flicker of something, surprise, perhaps, or even recognition. But before Jake could make sense of the situation, Caldwell stepped forward, extending a hand. "Thank you for helping my son," Caldwell said, his tone genuine but slightly formal. "I'm Robert Caldwell. I'm grateful for what you did today." Jake hesitated for a moment before shaking Caldwell's hand. The contrast between their worlds couldn't have been starker. "Just doing what I could," Jake said quietly. Caldwell's gaze softened. "I'd like to offer you something. Please, come inside." Jake was taken aback. He had expected to be dismissed, not invited into the home of a man like Caldwell. Please," Caldwell insisted. "At least let me offer you some coffee or a meal. It's the least I can do." Jake glanced at Ethan, who looked relieved. With a deep breath, he nodded and stepped inside. As he crossed the threshold into the well-furnished apartment, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of a much larger journey. A surprising encounter. As Jake stepped over the threshold into the Caldwell residence, he was immediately enveloped by the warmth and comfort of the well-appointed home. The contrast between the opulence of the Caldwell apartment and the roughness of his own life could not have been starker. It was a place where everything seemed to be meticulously arranged, from the polished marble floors to the carefully chosen artwork on the walls. The air was filled with the scent of freshly brewed coffee and baked goods, a far cry from the smells Jake had grown accustomed to on the streets. Robert Caldwell guided Jake into a spacious living room, where Ethan's mother, a woman with a gentle demeanor and kind eyes, was seated. Her gaze shifted from Ethan to Jake, a look of gratitude and curiosity crossing her face. "Mom, this is Jake," Ethan said, his voice tinged with a mix of relief and pride. "He's the one who helped me today." Mrs. Caldwell rose from her seat, extending a hand to Jake. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Jake. I'm Sarah Caldwell. Thank you so much for what you did for Ethan." Jake shook her hand, feeling the warmth of her grip and the sincerity in her voice. "I'm just glad I could help," he said, his own voice quiet and slightly overwhelmed by the sudden change in his circumstances. "Please have a seat," Sarah offered, gesturing to a comfortable armchair near the coffee table. "Would you like some coffee or tea?" Jake hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Coffee would be great, thank you." As Sarah moved to the kitchen, Jake settled into the armchair, feeling the plush cushions enveloping him. It was a luxury he hadn't experienced in a long time. The room was adorned with rich colors and elegant furniture, a testament to the Caldwell family's success and taste. Despite the opulence, there was an undeniable sense of warmth and hospitality that made Jake feel somewhat at ease. Robert Caldwell took a seat opposite Jake, his expression thoughtful. "Ethan told us what happened. It must have been quite a situation." Jake nodded, trying to collect his thoughts. "Yes, it was. I saw the bullies surrounding Ethan and just knew I had to do something. I couldn't stand by and watch." Caldwell's gaze was intense, as if trying to gauge the depth of Jake's character. "It's commendable that you stepped in to help. Not everyone would have done that, especially in your situation." Jake shrugged, slightly uncomfortable with the attention. "I just did what I thought was right." Sarah returned with a steaming cup of coffee and placed it on the table in front of Jake. She took a seat beside her husband, her eyes reflecting both concern and curiosity. "Jake, if you don't mind me asking, how did you end up in such a difficult situation?" The question took Jake by surprise. He had grown accustomed to people ignoring his existence, not prying into his past. He looked down at his coffee, its rich aroma, a stark contrast to the usual blandness of his diet. "It's a long story," Jake began slowly. "I lost my job a few years ago. Things just spiraled out of control from there. I've been trying to get back on my feet, but it's been tough." Caldwell nodded, his expression softening. "I understand. Life can be unpredictable, and sometimes circumstances can be unforgiving. It's clear that you have a good heart despite the hardships you faced. Jake appreciated this sentiment, though it felt strange to be the subject of such empathy. He sipped his coffee, savoring the warmth and richness. For a moment, he allowed himself to relax, taking in the comfort of the room and the kindness of the Caldwell family. Ethan, who had been listening quietly, spoke up. "Dad, could Jake stay here for a while? I mean, he helped me and—" Robert held up a hand gently. "Ethan, it's kind of you to think of Jake, but we need to be cautious. We don't know his full story yet." Ethan looked disappointed, but he didn't argue further. Jake could sense the tension in the room, the delicate balance between charity and caution. He wanted to assure them that he wasn't seeking more than just a temporary respite, but he wasn't sure how to express it without seeming insistent. "I'm not looking for a handout," Jake said finally. "I just need a place to rest for a bit. I'll be on my way once I'm ready." Sarah gave her husband a meaningful look, and Robert nodded in response. "All right, Jake, we can offer you a place to rest for the night, and we'll see from there. But I do want you to know that we're not just giving you charity. If you need help, we can try to find resources that might assist you in getting back on your feet." Jake felt a lump in his throat, a mix of gratitude and disbelief. "Thank you," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't expect this." Robert's expression softened and he leaned forward slightly. "It's the least we can do. And who knows? Maybe there's a way we can help each other in the future." The conversation shifted to more general topics as the Caldwells tried to make Jake feel more comfortable. They asked about his interests, his past experiences, and even shared a bit about their own lives. Jake was struck by their genuine curiosity and kindness. It was a stark contrast to the indifference he had grown accustomed to from most people. As the evening drew closer, Sarah prepared a simple but hearty meal. The family gathered around the dining table and Jake joined them, feeling a sense of inclusion he hadn't felt in years. The food was delicious and the conversation flowed easily. For a few hours, Jake was able to forget the harsh reality of his situation and enjoy the warmth of human connection. After dinner, Robert offered to show Jake to a guest room. "It's not much, but it should be comfortable enough. You're welcome to stay here for the night." Jake followed Robert down a hallway, his mind still reeling from the day's events. The guest room was cozy, with a neatly made bed and soft lighting. It was a far cry from the cold benches and makeshift shelters he was used to. "Thank you again," Jake said as he looked around the room, his voice filled with genuine appreciation. Robert nodded. "Rest up, Jake. Tomorrow we can talk more about how we might be able to help you further." As Robert left, Jake sat on the edge of the bed, feeling a mixture of relief and disbelief. The day had been a whirlwind, a confrontation in the park, an unexpected invitation into the Caldwell home, and now a place to rest. It was a small but significant turn of fortune, and Jake found himself reflecting on the strange twist of fate that had brought him here. He lay back on the bed, the softness of the mattress a luxury he hadn't experienced in a long time. As he closed his eyes, he couldn't help but wonder what the future held. The world had always seemed unforgiving, but perhaps, just maybe, there was a glimmer of hope on the horizon. Uncovering the past. Morning light filtered through the thin curtains of the guest room, casting a gentle glow across the cozy space. Jake awoke to the sound of distant birds chirping and the faint aroma of coffee brewing. For a moment he lay still, absorbing the comfort of the bed and the quiet serenity of the room. It felt like a dream, a stark contrast to the harsh reality of his usual existence. He sat up slowly, stretching and rubbing the sleep from his eyes. As he prepared for the day, Jake couldn't shake the sense of uncertainty about what the day would bring. The kindness of the Caldwell family was still surreal, and he wondered what they might have in mind for him. He dressed in the clean clothes Sarah had provided, simple but far better than his usual attire, and made his way downstairs. The scent of breakfast filled the air, a comforting blend of fresh bread and sizzling bacon. The Caldwells were already seated at the dining table, chatting amiably. Sarah looked up and greeted Jake with a warm smile. "Good morning, Jake. I hope you slept well." "I did, thank you," Jake replied, his voice filled with genuine gratitude. "This place is incredible." Robert was pouring coffee into mugs and he handed one to Jake as he took a seat at the table. "I'm glad you're comfortable. After breakfast, we'd like to talk more about how we can help you." As Jake sipped his coffee, he glanced around the family. Ethan was already seated, looking more relaxed than he had the day before. There was a sense of normalcy in the Caldwell household that Jake hadn't experienced in a long time, and it was both comforting and disorienting. Breakfast was a pleasant affair, filled with light conversation and the occasional burst of laughter. Ethan talked animatedly about his interests in school, while Sarah and Robert shared stories about their work and recent travels. Jake listened attentively, finding himself drawn into their world, a world so different from his own. After breakfast, Robert suggested they move to the living room to discuss the next steps. Jake followed them, feeling a mix of anticipation and apprehension. He had spent so long surviving day to day that the idea of discussing a future plan felt both foreign and hopeful. Once they were seated comfortably, Robert began the conversation. Jake, we want to understand more about your situation and how we might be able to assist you. If you're comfortable sharing, we'd like to know what led you to where you are now. Jake hesitated, but the genuine concern in Robert's eyes made it easier to open up. I lost my job a few years ago. It was a series of unfortunate events. My company downsized and I was let go. I tried to find another job, but the market was tough. Things got worse when my health started failing and I couldn't keep up with the bills. I lost my apartment, and since then, it's been a struggle to find stable work and housing. Robert nodded thoughtfully. I see. It sounds like you've been through a lot. Sometimes the systems meant to help people in need can be inadequate or hard to navigate. Sarah added, we're aware of some local programs and shelters, but it's often a matter of finding the right fit for each person. We'd like to connect you with resources that might provide more substantial support. Jake's heart warmed at their willingness to help. I appreciate that. I've been trying to find stable work and a place to live, but it's been challenging. I'm willing to do whatever it takes to get back on my feet. Robert smiled. That's the right attitude. We'll start by reaching out to some of our contacts and organizations that specialize in job placement and housing. We'll see what opportunities might be available for you. Ethan, who had been quietly listening, spoke up. Is there anything I can do to help, Jake? Jake looked at the boy, touched by his eagerness to assist. You've already done more than enough, Ethan. Just being kind means a lot. As the conversation continued, Sarah and Robert outlined a plan to connect Jake with various resources. They talk about job placement programs, counseling services, and temporary housing options. The Caldwells offered to help Jake with transportation and made arrangements for him to meet with a local employment counselor later in the week. Turning the tide, the following week brought a series of significant changes and challenges for Jake. The support from the Caldwell family had set him on a new path, but transitioning from homelessness to stability required more than just goodwill. It demanded persistence, resilience, and a willingness to confront his own fears and limitations. The days began early for Jake. Each morning he would wake up in the guest room of the Caldwell home, feeling a sense of gratitude and determination. Robert had arranged for Jake to meet with several professionals at the community center, and Jake approached these meetings with a mix of optimism and anxiety. The first meeting was with a career counselor named Lisa, who specialized in helping individuals like Jake reintegrate into the workforce. Lisa was a no-nonsense woman with a warm smile and a firm handshake. Her office was filled with motivational posters and pamphlets about job training programs. Good to meet you, Jake, Lisa said, extending her hand. I've heard a bit about your situation. Let's see how we can get you back on your feet. Jake took a seat across from her, feeling a bit uneasy. Thanks for meeting with me. I'm ready to do whatever it takes. Lisa nodded approvingly. Great attitude. Let's start by discussing your skills and experience. What kind of work have you done in the past? Jake took a deep breath, gathering his thoughts. I used to work in construction. I've got experience in various trades, carpentry, plumbing, electrical work. I was pretty good at it, but things went south when I lost my job. Lisa listened intently, jotting down notes. Okay, that's a good start. You have skills that are still in demand. We can explore job training programs that will refresh your skills and help you get certified if necessary. She began outlining a plan which included updating Jake's resume, enrolling him in a few workshops, and connecting him with potential employers in the area. Lisa's professionalism and encouragement helped Jake feel more confident about his prospects. The following day, Jake attended a workshop focused on resume writing and interview skills. The workshop was held in a large, well-lit room filled with other participants, each with their own story of struggle and hope. Jake found solace in the shared experience and listened intently as the instructor, a woman named Karen, provided tips and advice. Karen emphasized the importance of presenting oneself positively despite past hardships. Your story is a part of who you are, she said, but it doesn't define your future. Focus on what you can offer and how you've grown from your experiences. Jake took her words to heart. As he worked on his resume and practiced answering common interview questions, he began to see his situation in a new light. He realized that his past, while challenging, had equipped him with valuable lessons and strengths. The next step in Jake's journey was finding stable housing. Sarah Caldwell had connected him with a local housing agency that specialized in helping individuals transition from homelessness to permanent housing. The agency, run by a compassionate woman named Rachel, had a network of affordable housing options and support services. Rachel met with Jake to discuss his housing needs. We have several programs that might suit your situation, she said, showing Jake a list of available apartments and shelters. The goal is to find something that fits your budget and offers a stable environment. Jake reviewed the options with a mix of excitement and apprehension. I'm looking for something that's safe and affordable. I don't need anything fancy, just a place where I can start rebuilding. Rachel nodded. We can arrange for you to visit a few places and see what feels right. It's important that you find a place where you feel comfortable and secure. Over the next few days, Jake visited several potential apartments. Each visit brought a mix of emotions: hopefulness about the possibility of a new beginning, and anxiety about making the right choice. Finally, he found a small but welcoming apartment in a modest neighborhood. It wasn't much, but it was a significant step forward. With the help of Sarah and Robert, Jake was able to secure the apartment and start moving in. The process was both exhilarating and exhausting. He carefully packed his belongings and transported them to his new home, grateful for the support and assistance he received from the Caldwell family. As Jake settled into his new apartment, he felt a profound sense of accomplishment. The apartment, though simple, represented a fresh start and foundation for his future. He spent his first evening organizing his belongings and arranging the space to make it feel more like home. During this time, the Caldwells continued to offer their support. They checked in regularly, ensuring that Jake was adjusting well and providing any assistance he might need. Their kindness made Jake feel a sense of belonging and community that he had long been missing. One evening, after a long day of unpacking and organizing, Jake received a phone call from Lisa, his career counselor. "Jake, I wanted to let you know that we have a few job opportunities lined up for you. I think you'll be a good fit for some of these positions." Jake's heart raced with excitement. "That's fantastic news, Lisa. I'm ready to give it my all." The job interviews were scheduled over the next week, and Jake prepared diligently. He reviewed his resume, practiced his interview responses, and focused on presenting himself positively. The confidence he gained from the workshops and support from the Caldwells bolstered his resolve. The interviews were both nerve-wracking and hopeful. Jake faced questions about his past experiences and skills, but he answered with honesty and enthusiasm. He highlighted his strengths and the lessons he had learned from his time on the streets. His genuine approach resonated with the employers. By the end of the week, Jake received a job offer from a local construction company. The position was a good match for his skills and provided a stable income. Jake accepted the offer with gratitude and a renewed sense of purpose. As Jake prepared to start his new job, he reflected on the journey he had undergone. From the encounter in the park to finding support through the Caldwells and the community center, his life had transformed in ways he hadn't imagined. The challenges he had faced had led him to a new beginning, and he was determined to make the most of it. The transition to stability wasn't without its hurdles. Jake continued to face moments of doubt and obstacles, but the support he received from the Caldwells and the community gave him the strength to persevere. Each step forward was a testament to his resilience and the impact of kindness and support. As he began his new job and settled into his apartment, Jake felt a renewed sense of hope and determination. The road ahead was still uncertain, but he knew that with hard work and the support of those who cared, he could overcome the challenges and build a brighter future. In the months that followed, Jake continued to work diligently, striving to improve his situation and achieve his goals. He remained in touch with the Caldwells and the community center, grateful for the network of support that had played a crucial role in his journey. Jake's story became one of transformation and hope, a reminder that even in the darkest moments there is the potential for change and renewal. The kindness of strangers and the resilience of the human spirit had paved the way for a new chapter in his life, and Jake was determined to write a future filled with promise and possibility. A new beginning. Months had passed since Jake first crossed paths with the Caldwells, and his life had transformed dramatically. What once seemed like an endless struggle now felt like a journey toward rebuilding and growth. Jake had settled into his new apartment, found stable work, and was slowly but surely reconstructing his life from the ground up. The job at the construction company proved to be a perfect fit for Jake. His experience and skills were well utilized, and he quickly became a valued member of the team. His work ethic and dedication earned him respect from his colleagues and supervisors. Jake's daily routine now included early morning commutes to the construction site, fulfilling workdays and evenings spent maintaining his apartment and personal development. The apartment, though modest, became a place of comfort and sanctuary. Jake took pride in making it his own. He decorated it with simple but meaningful touches: a few framed photos of landscapes he'd admired, a well-worn armchair where he could read or reflect, and a small kitchen that he filled with the sense of home-cooked meals. For the first time in a long while, Jake felt a sense of stability and security. Despite the progress, Jake faced ongoing challenges. He was cautious about managing his finances and making sure he stayed on top of his responsibilities. The transition from homelessness to a structured life demanded careful planning and discipline. The lessons he'd learned during his time on the streets served him well, and he approached each day with a sense of gratitude and purpose. One afternoon, while Jake was at the construction site, he received an unexpected phone call from Sarah Caldwell. "Hi, Jake. I hope you're doing well. I was wondering if you might be available this weekend. Ethan has a school project that involves community service, and he'd love to work with you on it." Jake smiled at the thought. "I'd be honored, Sarah. What's the project about?" Sarah explained that Ethan's school had organized a community cleanup event in the local park, and each student was required to participate in a hands-on project to learn about civic responsibility and environmental stewardship. Ethan had chosen to work with Jake because he wanted to give back to the community and appreciated the positive impact Jake had made on his life. The weekend arrived, and Jake met Ethan at the park, where a group of students and volunteers had gathered for the cleanup event. The park, once a place of turmoil and fear, was now the scene of a collaborative effort to beautify and restore the space. Jake felt a deep sense of fulfillment as he joined Ethan and the other volunteers, picking up trash, planting flowers, and working together to improve the environment. Ethan was enthusiastic and engaged, working alongside Jake with a sense of purpose. As they labored, they chatted about school, hobbies, and the changes Jake had experienced in his life. Ethan's youthful energy and curiosity were infectious, and Jake found himself reflecting on how far he had come since their first meeting. During a break, Ethan approached Jake with a thoughtful expression. "Jake, I've been thinking about how much you've helped me and how much you've changed since we first met. I'm really proud of you." Jake was touched by Ethan's words. "Thanks, Ethan. It means a lot to hear that. You've been a big part of my journey, too. Seeing you grow and do well is incredibly rewarding." As the day came to an end, the park had transformed into a cleaner, more inviting space. The volunteers gathered for a group photo, capturing the spirit of community and collaboration that had defined the event. Jake felt a profound sense of accomplishment knowing that he had contributed to something meaningful and positive. After the cleanup, Jake joined the Caldwells for a celebratory dinner. The atmosphere at their home was warm and joyous, filled with laughter and shared stories. Jake marveled at the sense of belonging he felt in their company, a stark contrast to the isolation he had once known. As they sat around the dinner table, Robert spoke about the importance of community and the impact that individuals can have on each other's lives. "Jake, your journey is a testament to the power of kindness and support. You've shown remarkable resilience and determination. It's inspiring to see how you've embraced this new chapter in your life." Jake looked around the Caldwells, his heart swelling with gratitude. "I couldn't have done this without all of you. Your support and belief in me made a world of difference. I'm grateful for the second chance and the opportunity to make a positive impact." In the months that followed, Jake continued to thrive in his new role. He actively participated in community events, seeking opportunities to give back and support others in need. His experiences had given him a unique perspective, and he was eager to share his story and offer guidance to those facing similar struggles. Jake also became involved in local advocacy groups focused on homelessness and poverty alleviation. He spoke at events and shared his journey to raise awareness about the challenges faced by individuals in similar situations. His efforts helped to bridge the gap between those who had experienced hardship and those who sought to make a difference. The support from the Caldwells remained a constant source of encouragement. They continued to be a part of Jake's life, celebrating his successes and offering guidance when needed. Their friendship had become a cornerstone of his new beginning, and Jake cherished the bond they had formed. One significant milestone in Jake's journey came when he was invited to speak at a community forum about the impact of support networks on overcoming homelessness. The event was attended by local leaders, social workers, and members of the community. Jake took the stage with a sense of pride and purpose, sharing his story and advocating for the importance of compassion and support. As he spoke, Jake looked out at the audience, many of whom had played a role in his journey. He spoke of the Caldwells' kindness, the support from the community center, and the transformative power of believing in oneself. The audience listened attentively, and Jake's words resonated deeply. The forum was a success, and Jake received heartfelt feedback from attendees who were moved by his story. The event sparked meaningful conversations about ways to improve support systems and create more opportunities for individuals facing hardship. As the years went by, Jake's life continued to evolve. He achieved personal and professional milestones, and his story became a symbol of hope and resilience. He remained connected to the Caldwells and the community, always seeking ways to give back and make a positive impact. Jake's journey from homelessness to stability was a testament to the power of kindness, community support, and personal determination. The challenges he faced had shaped him into a stronger and more compassionate individual. His story served as a reminder that even in the face of adversity, there is always the potential for transformation and renewal. In the end, Jake's life was a reflection of the incredible journey he had undertaken, a journey marked by struggle, hope, and the unwavering belief that a better future was possible. His experiences had taught him the value of resilience, the importance of support, and the transformative power of a second chance. Jake's story continued to inspire others, and his legacy of kindness and perseverance lived on through the lives he touched and the positive change he brought to his community.